Power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers behind oak doors and thick robes, cloaked in silence so long it forgets how to be questioned. But every once in a generation, someone doesn't just ask questions, they demand answers. What happens when someone dares to stare down that kind of silence and say no more? Let me take you to the day Jasmine Crockett did just that. It was a Tuesday, but not an ordinary one. Not in DC, and certainly not in Courtroom 7A. By 8:45 a.m., the marble halls were already full, press badges flashing, quiet murmurs echoing off the ceiling, whispers of what was about to happen. Jasmine Crockett sat alone at the defendant's table, her fingers resting lightly on a manila folder. Slim, yellow-tabbed. Nothing about her posture screamed defiance, but something in her stillness did. Across the room, the bench loomed, higher than it needed to be. Symbolic, some said. Condescending, others argued. And behind it, Justice Clarence Thomas sat as if carved from stone, expression blank, hands resting near the gavel like it was a weapon rather than a tool. At 9 sharp, the gavel cracked through the room. This court is now in session. No introductions. No ceremony. Just the weight of centuries bearing down on a woman who had dared to speak too loudly, too clearly, too publicly. Justice Thomas leaned forward. "Representative Jasmine Crockett," he said, his voice wrapped in frost. "This body has found you in willful defiance of court mandates. As such, we are imposing a financial penalty of $500 million. Silence. Then the room shifted. Not loudly, not all at once, but the kind of shift that happens when reality bends a little too far to stay believable. $500 million? The number didn't just hang in the air. It hit like a slap. Reporters froze, legal aides exchanged glances. One junior attorney dropped their pen. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to zoom in or back away. And yet Jasmine sat still, breathing. Then calmly, deliberately, she stood. She didn't fidget. She didn't look at her team. Her gaze was fixed only on one man, the justice who'd just tried to erase her with a number. "Are you finished?" The words were soft, but in the courtroom, they landed like a bell. Justice Thomas stiffened. "Excuse me?" She stepped forward, just once. "I said, are you finished, sir? Because I am." Without breaking eye contact, she reached into her blazer, pulled out the folder, and walked it to the clerk. Not quickly, not dramatically, just like someone who had waited a long time for this moment and now refused to rush it. "Please enter this into the record." The clerk looked at it, unsure. "What's inside?" "Truth," she replied. "Sworn depositions, bank statements, tax records, internal memos, all connected, all dated, all pointing to this bench." Gasps didn't erupt. They leaked out like steam from a system suddenly under pressure. One of the junior judges leaned over to whisper something, but no one heard what. Jasmine turned back to the bench. "Justice Thomas," she said, "you should have recused yourself from this case, but you didn't. And now it's clear why. The companies who lobbied for this fine to be imposed, you have financial stakes in 3 of the 4. Silence, dense, palpable." A reporter coughed. Someone in the gallery exhaled audibly. The courtroom was no longer just a courtroom. It was a stage, and Jasmine had flipped the script. Thomas reached for his gavel but didn't slam it. "This is a smear tactic," he said. "No," Jasmine said, voice rising not in volume but in weight. "It's a pattern, one the public was never supposed to see, but they're going to." She took another step forward. 3 months ago, you had dinner with Wilcroft Holdings. 2 weeks after that, a memo circulated recommending a fine against me. That memo uses the exact language you wrote in your opinion. This isn't conjecture. It's a chain of custody. One of the other judges looked visibly uncomfortable. A second picked up a phone. The gallery had stopped reacting. They were listening now. Really listening. And Jasmine? She wasn't finished. "You want to fine me $500 million? Fine. But know this, you're not punishing me. You're trying to make an example of someone who refused to bow, who refused to shut up. You turned this courtroom into a weapon, and I'm turning it into a mirror." This time the gavel did slam, but no one was silenced, because the truth was louder. As Jasmine walked back to her seat, the gallery stirred again. Not chaotically. Not with shouting, just presence. One man stood, then a woman, then a row. The judge whispered something. The session was called to recess. But Jasmine stayed standing. She looked out at the gallery. "This isn't about me," she said. "It's about what happens when power becomes afraid of accountability. When law is used not to protect, but to punish. If you've ever felt like your voice didn't matter, like your truth was inconvenient, pay attention, because this is how the machine breaks, with light." The murmur became unity. The reporters began writing again. Phones came out. Tweets went live. The gallery wasn't a gallery anymore. It was an audience to a reckoning. When court resumed, Clarence Thomas didn't return to the bench. The seat with his nameplate remained empty. And Jasmine Crockett? She remained exactly where she was, unshaken. The spark had been lit, and nothing in Washington would look the same again. When a system built on silence hears its first shout of truth, it doesn't collapse. Not right away. First, it resists. It stalls. It whispers to itself that nothing has changed, that it's too big to fail, too protected to shake. But it had already started. And Jasmine Crockett? She didn't kick the door open. She knocked, waited, then handed over the receipts. This episode doesn't begin in court. It begins in the hallway. Jasmine stood by the tall window on the second floor, looking out over the gathering crowd. Reporters, students, activists, all converging, drawn not just by scandal, but by a sense that something rare was happening. A reckoning, maybe, or a resurrection. Her aides stepped close. They're not leaving. Even the Hill reporters are staying past their deadline. Jasmine didn't turn. She was sipping water, her fingers still resting inside her blazer pocket. "That's not a crowd," she said. "That's a temperature check." Downstairs, the courtroom doors opened again. Two judges returned to the bench, faces tighter now, words more deliberate. The air in the room wasn't calm. It was calculated, controlled. But no one was fooled. Judge Alvarez, a senior figure who had mostly stayed quiet, tapped his mic. "This court acknowledges that new documentation has been entered into the record by Representative Crockett. We have reviewed this material, and..." He paused. That pause was louder than anything said all morning. "We have questions." There it was. The shift. The court wasn't just addressing her anymore. It was pivoting. The prosecutor, who had previously echoed the fine with robotic precision, spoke up again, less confident this time. "In light of the new materials and the appearance of potential judicial conflict, we recommend the enforcement of the financial penalty be temporarily suspended, pending a full review." Murmurs. Cameras clicked. Someone whispered. She turned the whole case inside out. "But Jasmine?" She simply nodded. "I trust the process when it's clean," she said. "So let's clean it." She wasn't posturing. She wasn't trying to win a soundbite. She was holding the door open for truth to walk in. The clerk, the same one who had taken her file, stood. His face had changed, less neutral now, more pale. "I have reviewed the evidence. The timestamps check out. The contents appear consistent with the claims." Another judge leaned forward. "Representative Crockett, will you provide full digital access to the original materials?" Jasmine didn't miss a beat. "You'll find a secure link in the court's inbox, encrypted, unredacted." That moment was the second rupture, not just because she had the truth, but because she came with nothing to hide. And that terrified them more than the contents of the file. They weren't used to people walking in unafraid. And now, the courtroom was shifting, not around power, but around transparency. Outside, the crowd had grown to hundreds. Protest signs, microphones, phones raised high, no chanting yet, just presence, just unity. Because Jasmine hadn't tweeted. She hadn't gone live. But the message was out there. She brought the receipts. Cable news stopped their programming. Hashtags flooded platforms, the Crockett files, receipts over rulings. Power is not proof. Back inside, a judge whispered to a clerk. The clerk stepped forward. "This court will recess for 30 minutes. But Jasmine didn't leave. She sat, calm, composed. Her team didn't whisper. Her aide didn't flinch. Because they knew what came next wasn't chaos, it was exposure. In the next 30 minutes, something wild happened. The sealed file that Jasmine had referenced? It was already live. Not leaked, not whispered, uploaded. With a chain of custody, digital signatures, time logs, and audit trails that traced back to congressional servers. By the time MSNBC got to the segment, the documents were being downloaded in real time. Not by conspiracy theorists, by law schools, ethics boards, journalists who had been chasing this trail for years. The fine had been issued with a purpose, to drown her. But it did something else. It forced the world to listen. When court resumed, the seat marked Justice Clarence Thomas remained empty. A different judge took the bench. Tension shifted to curiosity, and curiosity in rooms of power is more dangerous than defiance. "We are reconvening," the new judge said, "and based on submitted materials, this court will suspend enforcement of the prior ruling until the inquiry is complete." Jasmine didn't celebrate. She simply responded, "Understood." A few seconds passed. The prosecutor cleared his throat. "Let the record reflect," Jasmine interrupted, "that the charges against me were built on recommendations by lobbying groups connected to entities Judge Thomas held investments in. That isn't theory. That's traceable." A new judge leaned forward. "What you're suggesting is judicial compromise." "What I'm suggesting," Jasmine said, "is that the law can't punish truth while protecting conflict." Silence again, not weakness, just recalibration. Then the impossible happened. The back door opened, and Clarence Thomas entered. No robe, just a dark suit, heavy shoulders, uneven breath. He didn't go to the bench, he walked to the table, stood level with Jasmine. "This is a misunderstanding," he began. She didn't move. "This is a system, and for once it's facing itself." Their eyes met. Not a stare down, a reckoning. "You just declared war on a Supreme Court justice," he said. She leaned in. "No, I reminded a justice that the people are the landlords of power." And just like that, the gallery shifted again. Quiet, steady, like a wave rising. She hadn't won, but she wasn't on trial anymore. The court was. And the storm was only just beginning. Here is your text with professional punctuation added and no other changes. When systems fall, they don't always shatter. Sometimes they unravel quietly, thread by thread, until the truth stands bare, undeniable. This wasn't just about one ruling. It was about the bones beneath the robe. And Jasmine Crockett? She didn't just hold up a mirror, she held the receipts, and she held the line. The morning after Thomas reappeared in court without his robe, the world had already shifted. Every news cycle led with one headline: judicial conflict. By 8 a.m., 3 oversight committees had issued formal letters of inquiry. The Ethics Commission requested full financial disclosures from Thomas and any justice connected to lobbying networks listed in Jasmine's materials. The pressure wasn't speculative anymore. It was procedural. That same day, Jasmine received a brown envelope, unmarked, hand-delivered. Inside, a letter. A proposal. Withdraw your demand for financial records to be unsealed, and in return, the fine would be dismissed quietly. Additionally, a generous donation, $10 million, would be made to educational initiatives in her district. It wasn't subtle. It was strategy dressed as charity. She didn't rage. She didn't go live. She forwarded it to the Office of Congressional Ethics. Then she went back to work. No tweets, no interviews, just protocol. And that silence said more than any soundbite ever could. Because by the time the law firm that drafted the letter denied involvement, its website was down and its donation records had been scrubbed. The next week, the Judiciary Committee subpoenaed 3 lobbying entities and issued discovery requests to every firm named in the Crockett files. And then the whistleblowers came. Not 1. Not 2, but 5. Emails, voicemails, internal memos, even a transcript of a private strategy session. The fine isn't about guilt. It's about making her radioactive, discredit her before budget season. The memo ended with a single phrase: "She screams, we stall." It leaked, it spread. And suddenly the idea that the court had been weaponized wasn't just a theory. It was documented. Congress scheduled hearings. They didn't name her as a target. They named her as a witness. The inquiry, accountability in the highest court. She wore navy. No statement. No speechwriters. Just facts. Just fire. When asked why she pursued the issue even after the fine was suspended, she answered simply, because suspension isn't accountability. It's a pause. And when asked if she believed Thomas should step down, "I believe the system should be worthy of its own rulings. If it isn't, it should be reformed or removed." That quote echoed everywhere. Then came the final leak. An audio file, 47 seconds, Thomas's voice. "Let her run. We stall. She burns capital. Even if she flips it, she loses momentum." The laughter that followed wasn't just cruel, it was coordinated. But Jasmine wasn't finished, because she had the full recording. Not 47 seconds, 61 minutes, 3 voices, 1 strategy, absolute clarity, and she gave them 48 hours to tell the truth. Not to her, to the people. They didn't. So she released it. The explosion wasn't just online. It hit the foundation of the judiciary. 2 clerks resigned. A federal judge issued a statement. The public trust has been fractured. And Thomas? He didn't step down. He stepped aside. Administrative leave pending inquiry. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't confession. But it was the first time in his decades-long tenure that he blinked. And Congress moved fast. The Crockett Clause, a binding legislative reform requiring all Supreme Court justices to submit quarterly financial disclosures and undergo third-party ethics reviews. The judiciary didn't applaud, but they complied. And Jasmine? She didn't dance on the ashes. She returned home, held town halls, listened more than she spoke. A student asked her, "How did you not break?" She smiled. "I did, just not where they could see." Weeks later, a framed document was added to the National Archives, a copy of the $500 million fine. Beside it, a quote, "They tried to fine her into silence. She turned it into reform." Jasmine Crockett didn't just win. She rewrote the rules and reminded the nation that power isn't proof. But truth leaves a trail you can follow. And she did.